The fluorescent lights of the pharmacy buzzed overhead as Linda Rodriguez stood at the counter, her worn purse clutched tightly against her chest. She'd been standing there for almost 5 minutes now, just staring at the small orange prescription bottle the pharmacist had placed in front of her. "That'll be $185, the pharmacist repeated, this time a little louder, as if Linda hadn't heard her the first time. But Linda had heard. She'd heard perfectly well. The number just didn't make sense in her world. $185 might as well have been 1 million. Her fingers trembled slightly as she opened her wallet. Inside were 11 $20 bills, everything she had left after paying rent 3 days ago. $220 to last her and her daughter until her next paycheck, which was still 9 days away. The pharmacist, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, seemed to notice Linda's hesitation. "Do you have insurance?" she asked gently. Linda shook her head. "Lost it when I lost my job at the factory. I'm working at Romano's Diner now, but they don't offer benefits for part-timers." "I see." The pharmacist's expression softened. "You know, there are some assistance programs that might—" "I've tried." Linda cut in quietly, not meaning to be rude. "I make just enough that I don't qualify, but not enough to actually afford things." It was the cruel middle ground where so many people lived. Too much income for help, too little for survival. Linda glanced toward the pharmacy's front window. Through the glass, she could see her old Honda in the parking lot. Inside sat her 8-year-old daughter Mia doing homework in the back seat. Or at least pretending to. Linda knew Mia was probably hungry. She'd only had a small bowl of cereal that morning and whatever they'd served for lunch at school. The insulin in front of her was supposed to last a month. Without it, Linda's diabetes would spiral out of control. She already knew what that felt like. The constant thirst, the exhaustion, the way her vision would blur at the edges. Last time she'd gone without her medication, she'd ended up in the emergency room with a blood sugar level so high the doctors had looked genuinely worried. But right now, standing in this pharmacy, Linda wasn't thinking about herself. She was thinking about the almost empty refrigerator at home. She was thinking about how Mia had asked yesterday if they could have spaghetti for dinner, her favorite meal, something she hadn't eaten in weeks. She was thinking about the way her daughter had quietly accepted crackers and peanut butter instead, never complaining, never asking for more. "Ma'am?" The pharmacist's voice brought her back to the present. "Did you want to go ahead with the prescription?" Linda looked down at her wallet again. With $185 gone, she'd have $35 left. $35 for 9 days of food, gas to get to work, and whatever else came up. It wasn't possible, but with the full $220, she could buy groceries. Real groceries. Chicken, rice, vegetables, milk, bread, eggs. She could make Mia actual meals. Her daughter could have breakfast before school, pack a decent lunch, come home to something warm for dinner. "I'll come back for it," Linda heard herself say, her voice barely above a whisper. "When do you think you'll be able to pick it up?" the pharmacist asked, already moving to put the bottle back in the shelving behind her. Linda didn't answer. They both knew the truth. She probably wouldn't be back, at least not until things got really bad. Maybe not even then. "Thank you anyway," Linda managed, turning away before the pharmacist could see the tears threatening to spill over. She walked through the automatic doors and across the parking lot, each step feeling heavier than the last. When she reached the car, she took a moment to wipe her eyes and force a smile before opening the door. "Hey, sweetie," she said, sliding into the driver's seat. "All done. What do you say we stop by the grocery store?" Mia looked up from her notebook, her face brightening. "Really? Can we get stuff for spaghetti?" "Absolutely," Linda said, her smile becoming a little more genuine despite everything. "And maybe some of those cookies you like. The ones with the chocolate chips?" "Those are the ones." As Linda started the car, she felt her glucose monitor vibrate against her hip, a warning that her blood sugar was already climbing higher than it should. She'd been rationing her insulin for the past week, taking less than prescribed to make it stretch. Now she was out completely. She silenced the monitor and pulled out of the parking lot. At the grocery store, Linda became a mathematician. Every item that went into the cart was calculated, compared, justified. The store brand pasta was 40 cents cheaper than the name brand. The chicken thighs were on sale. She could make the eggs last longer if they had them for dinner a couple times instead of just breakfast. Mia walked beside the cart occasionally, pointing at things but never asking if they could buy them. She'd learned not to ask, which broke Linda's heart in ways she couldn't express. "Mom, are you okay?" Mia asked suddenly. "You keep leaning on the cart." Linda straightened up, not realizing she'd been using the shopping cart for support. The exhaustion was setting in earlier each day now. "I'm fine, honey, just tired from work." "You're always tired," Mia observed with the blunt honesty of children. "That's what happens when you're a grown-up." Linda tried to joke, but Mia didn't laugh. At the checkout, Linda counted out the bills carefully. The total came to $163.42. She handed over the cash and accepted her change, $56.58 to last over a week. Loading the groceries into the trunk, Linda felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief that Mia would eat well for the next couple of weeks. Dread about what would happen to her own body in the meantime. That evening, Linda made spaghetti with meat sauce while Mia set the table. It was such a simple thing, making dinner, but it felt almost celebratory after weeks of scrambled eggs and sandwiches. "This is so good, Mom," Mia said around a mouthful of pasta, and Linda had to look away to hide the tears in her eyes. "I'm glad you like it, baby." After Mia went to bed, Linda sat at the kitchen table and checked her blood sugar. 347. Dangerously high. She drank a large glass of water and tried not to think about what she'd done, tried not to think about the consequences that were already beginning to build in her body. She told herself it would be okay. She just needed to make it to her next paycheck. Then she could figure something out. Maybe pick up extra shifts. Maybe finally get approved for one of those assistance programs. But deep down, Linda knew the truth. There would always be another impossible choice waiting. Another moment of standing at a counter trying to decide which basic need to sacrifice. This was just how life was now. She finished her water and went to bed, her body already aching in ways that worried her. Tomorrow she had a double shift at the diner. She couldn't afford to be sick. She couldn't afford anything anymore. 5 days had passed since Linda walked away from the pharmacy counter, and her body was making sure she knew it had been a mistake. She stood in the break room at Romano's diner, gripping the edge of the sink as another wave of dizziness washed over her. The face staring back at her in the mirror looked wrong, pale, with dark circles under the eyes and a sheen of sweat across the forehead, despite the restaurant's aggressive air conditioning. "You look like death," her coworker Rita said, not unkindly, as she walked in to grab her apron. Rita had worked at Romano's for 15 years and had seen everything. "When's the last time you took a day off?" "Can't afford to," Linda said, splashing cold water on her face. "I'm covering Jenny's shift tomorrow, too." Rita shook her head. "Girl, money doesn't matter if you're dead." But Rita didn't understand. Rita's husband had a good job with the electric company. They had 2 incomes, health insurance, a safety net. For Linda, there was no net. There was just the constant free fall and the hope that somehow she'd keep landing on her feet. "I'm fine," Linda lied, drying her face with a rough paper towel. "Just need some coffee." The lunch rush started at 11:30 and by noon Romano's was packed. Linda moved through the crowded dining room on autopilot, balancing plates and refilling drinks and smiling at customers who sometimes tipped well and sometimes didn't tip at all. Around 1 o'clock, she noticed her vision starting to do something strange. The edges of everything looked fuzzy, like she was seeing the world through a dirty window. She blinked hard, trying to clear it, but it didn't help. "Table 7 needs more coffee," the manager called out, and Linda nodded, grabbing the pot from the warmer. Walking toward table 7 felt like walking through water. Each step required more effort than it should. Her legs felt weak, almost rubbery, and there was a strange tingling in her fingers that made holding the coffee pot harder than usual. She was halfway to the table when the dizziness hit for real. Not the mild wooziness she'd been fighting all morning, but a violent spinning sensation that made the entire room tilt sideways. Linda tried to steady herself, reaching out for something, anything to hold on to. Her hand found the back of a chair, but it wasn't enough. Her knees buckled and she felt herself falling in slow motion. The crash of breaking dishes seemed very far away, even though Linda knew the sound was coming from the plates she'd been carrying. Someone screamed. Or maybe multiple people screamed. It was hard to tell with the rushing sound in her ears. She hit the floor hard, her shoulder taking most of the impact. The fluorescent lights on the ceiling swam in and out of focus. Faces appeared above her. Concerned faces, worried faces, one man holding a phone and talking rapidly to someone. "Call 911, someone said. "Is she breathing?" "Give her space." Linda wanted to tell them all that she was fine, that she just needed a minute, that she couldn't afford an ambulance. But her mouth wouldn't form the words. Everything felt disconnected, like her brain was trying to control a body that no longer belonged to her. Rita's face appeared in her field of vision. "Linda, honey, can you hear me?" "An ambulance is coming. Just stay still, the ambulance." The thought cut through the fog. Ambulances cost money. Emergency rooms cost money. She tried to sit up, tried to wave them all away, but her body refused to cooperate. The next thing she knew, there were paramedics crouching beside her, checking her pulse, shining lights in her eyes, asking questions she couldn't quite process. "Possible diabetic emergency," one of them said. "Blood sugar's over 500. They loaded her onto a stretcher, and as they wheeled her through the restaurant, Linda caught glimpses of the customers, some looking concerned, others annoyed that their lunch had been interrupted. Through the front window, she could see the ambulance waiting, its lights flashing red and blue against the afternoon sun. The hospital was a blur of bright lights and urgent voices. Nurses hooked her up to machines that beeped and hummed. Someone inserted an IV into her arm. A doctor appeared, young and tired-looking, asking questions about her medical history. "When did you last take your insulin?" he asked. Linda's mouth felt dry as cotton. 5 days ago." The doctor's eyebrows shot up. 5 days? Why would you stop taking it?" "Didn't stop," Linda managed. "Ran out. Couldn't afford more." Something shifted in the doctor's expression. He glanced at the nurse, then back at Linda. "We're going to get your blood sugar down, but we need to talk about this. Over the next few hours." As the insulin drip slowly brought her blood sugar back to safer levels, Linda became more aware of her surroundings. She was in a curtained-off area in the emergency room, machines beeping steadily beside her bed. Every beep felt like another dollar being added to a bill she'd never be able to pay. Her phone rang in her purse. They'd brought it with her from the restaurant. Linda fumbled for it and saw the school's number on the screen. "Hello?" she answered, her voice hoarse. "Ms. Rodriguez? This is Principal Chen from Lincoln Elementary. We have Mia here in the office. She's fine, but we got a call from the hospital listed as your emergency contact. Is everything all right?" The emergency contact. Mrs. Patterson, her 70-year-old neighbor who'd agreed to be listed in case something happened during school hours. Sweet Mrs. Patterson, who barely got by on her Social Security check and definitely shouldn't have to deal with this. "There was an accident at work," Linda said carefully, not wanting to frighten Mia if she was nearby. "I'm at County General. Is Mrs. Patterson able to pick her up?" "She's already on her way. Mia's a little worried, but we've assured her you're okay. Are you okay?" Linda looked at the IV in her arm, the monitor showing her vital signs, the thin hospital gown she didn't remember changing into. "I will be." An hour later, Mrs. Patterson arrived at the hospital with Mia in tow. Linda's daughter rushed to the bedside, her eyes red from crying. "Mom, what happened? Are you okay? They said you fell at work." Linda reached out with her free hand, the one without the IV, and pulled Mia close. "I'm okay, sweetie. I just got a little dizzy. The doctors are taking good care of me." "But why did you get dizzy?" Mia asked, and Linda could hear the fear underneath the question. Fear that her mom might leave her alone, the way some kids at school talked about parents who'd gotten sick and never came home. "My blood sugar got too high," Linda explained, trying to keep her voice calm. "Remember how I told you I have diabetes? Sometimes I need special medicine to keep it balanced. I missed a few doses and my body didn't like that very much." "Why didn't you take your medicine?" It was such an innocent question, asked with such genuine confusion, and it broke Linda's heart. Because to Mia, the solution was simple. If you're sick, you take medicine. That's what moms always said. That's what made sense. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that sometimes adults have to choose between medicine and food? That sometimes love means sacrificing yourself so your child doesn't go hungry? "It's complicated, honey," Linda said softly, stroking Mia's hair. Mrs. Patterson stood by the curtain, her weathered hands clutched together. her face full of understanding that came from her own years of struggle. "You should have told me you were having trouble," she said quietly. "You have enough to worry about." "Mrs. P, nobody has enough to worry about that they can't help a neighbor." Before Linda could respond, the curtain pulled back and a woman in a navy blue blazer stepped through. She carried a tablet and had the efficient but sympathetic look of someone who dealt with difficult situations all day long. "Ms. Rodriguez, I'm Cheryl Kim from Patient Services. Do you have a moment to talk about your treatment plan and coverage options?" Linda knew what this really meant. This was the person who would tell her how much this emergency room visit would cost, what payment plans were available, what programs she might qualify for. She'd been through this conversation before. "Mia, honey, why don't you go with Mrs. Patterson to the waiting room?" Linda suggested. "Maybe get a snack from the vending machine?" Mrs. Patterson took the hint, gently guiding Mia away despite the girl's protests. Once they were gone, Cheryl pulled up a chair and opened her tablet. "The doctor tells me you stopped taking your insulin because you couldn't afford it. Is that correct?" "Yes. And do you have insurance?" "No." Cheryl's fingers moved across her screen. "I see. Well, today's emergency room visit, including the ambulance transport, IV treatment, and monitoring, will likely come to around $4,000. Without insurance, $4,000. Linda felt the number hit her like a physical blow. $4,000. She didn't have $400. She barely had $40. "We can set up a payment plan," Cheryl continued, "as low as $100 a month, though at that rate it would take several years to pay off. We also have some hardship programs you might qualify for." "I applied for those before," Linda said quietly. "I make too much to qualify. How much do you make if you don't mind me asking?" "I work full-time at Romano's Diner. With tips, maybe $28,000 a year." Cheryl's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes softened. They both knew that $28,000 supporting a single mother and child in this economy was barely survival. But according to the forms and the rules, it was too much for help. "I'll see what I can do," Cheryl said, which Linda had learned was code for probably nothing. "But I'll try to make you feel better." After Cheryl left, Linda lay. Robert Hayes sat in the uncomfortable plastic chair of the hospital waiting room, a cup of terrible coffee cooling in his hands. He'd been sitting there for about 40 minutes, waiting for the nurse to call him back to see his daughter, who was recovering from appendix surgery in one of the rooms upstairs. At 58 years old, Robert had spent enough time in hospitals to know that waiting was just part of the experience. He'd learned to bring a book, to settle in, to accept that medical time moved differently than regular time. But today he couldn't focus on his book. He kept getting distracted by the conversations happening around him. The emergency room waiting area was separated from the treatment area by only a thin fabric curtain and some distance. It wasn't enough. Robert could hear everything. Doctors giving updates, patients groaning in pain, families having worried conversations in a dozen different languages. He'd been trying not to listen, trying to give people their privacy, but one conversation kept breaking through his attempts to read. A woman was talking to someone from the hospital's billing department. Her voice was quiet but carried a weight that Robert recognized, the heaviness of someone drowning in circumstances beyond their control. "I applied for those before. I make too much to qualify." Robert glanced up from his book. Through a gap in the curtains, he could see a woman lying in a hospital bed, an IV in her arm, talking to a professional-looking person with a tablet. Even from a distance, Robert could see the exhaustion in the woman's face, the defeat in her posture. "How much do you make, if you don't mind me asking?" "I work full-time at Romano's Diner. With tips, maybe $28,000 a year." $28,000 a year. Robert's mind did the math automatically. Less than $15 an hour, probably no benefits, and she was supporting at least herself, possibly others. In this city with these costs, that was nothing. He tried to go back to his book, but he couldn't. Something about the woman's voice, about the quiet resignation in it, had hooked into his chest and wouldn't let go. The billing person left, and Robert heard the woman let out a long, shaky breath. Then to his surprise, he heard soft crying. Not loud, dramatic sobs, the quiet, almost silent crying of someone who'd learned not to let others hear their pain. Robert stared at the same paragraph in his book for the third time without reading a single word. He thought about leaving, going to the cafeteria, removing himself from this stranger's private moment of grief. But he didn't move. A few minutes later, an elderly woman appeared with a young girl, maybe 8 or 9 years old. The child ran toward the curtained area, and Robert heard her frightened voice asking if her mom was okay. "I'm okay, sweetie. I just got a little dizzy." The mother's voice had completely changed. All the defeat and exhaustion had been replaced by forced cheerfulness, the tone every parent uses when they're trying to protect their child from scary truths. "But why did you get dizzy?" "My blood sugar got too high. Remember how I told you I have diabetes? Sometimes I need special medicine to keep it balanced. I missed a few doses and my body didn't like that very much. Why didn't you take your medicine?" Robert closed his book. The child's question hung in the air. Innocent, confused, perfectly logical. Why didn't you take your medicine? Such a simple question, such an impossible answer. It's complicated, honey. No, Robert thought. It's not complicated at all. It's brutally simple. She couldn't afford it. He'd heard enough to piece together the story. Single mother, low-wage job, no insurance, had to choose between medication and something else. Food, probably, based on the child's presence. She'd chosen her daughter over herself, and it had landed her in the emergency room with what sounded like a diabetic crisis. Robert sat very still, memories flooding back unbidden. He was 8 years old, sitting in a hospital waiting room much like this one, while his mother lay in a room somewhere receiving treatment for the diabetes she'd been managing poorly for years. His father had left when Robert was 3. His mother had worked 2 jobs, cleaning houses during the day, waiting tables at night, trying to keep them afloat. He remembered her checking her blood sugar with a little machine that beeped. He remembered her taking shots that made her wince. He remembered her organizing her pills in a weekly container, counting them out like they were precious gems. Most clearly, he remembered the day she'd sat him down at their small kitchen table and explained that she was going to be stretching her medicine a little differently. She'd smiled when she said it, like it was no big deal, but even at 8 years old, Robert had understood that stretching medicine meant taking less than she should. That was the beginning of the end, though it took years to play out. His mother had slowly deteriorated, her body breaking down from inadequately controlled diabetes. By the time Robert was 16, she was dealing with neuropathy, vision problems, and kidney damage. She died 2 weeks after his 18th birthday, her body simply giving up after years of trying to function without proper care. The doctors had told him that with proper treatment, his mother could have lived for decades. But proper treatment required money they'd never had. Robert had built his fortune, not overnight, but through decades of work, luck, and the kind of opportunities his mother had never gotten. He'd started with a small tech company in his garage, sold it for a modest profit, then built something bigger. Then bigger still. Now at 58, he was worth more money than he could spend in 3 lifetimes. He owned houses he rarely visited. He had cars he barely drove. He donated to charities and funded scholarships and sat on boards, but somehow it never felt like enough. Nothing could bring his mother back. Nothing could change the fact that she'd died because she'd been poor and the system had failed her. And now, 34 years later, he was sitting in a hospital waiting room listening to history repeat itself. Through the gap in the curtain, Robert watched as the elderly neighbor guided the young girl away, probably to give the mother privacy. The child kept looking back over her shoulder, worry etched across her small face. Robert knew that expression. He'd worn it himself as a child, the fear that your parent might disappear might not be okay, that the one person keeping your world together might fall apart. His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant asking about a board meeting next week. Robert stared at it, then at the curtain hiding the woman in the hospital bed, then back at his phone. How many board meetings had he attended where they discussed quarterly profits and shareholder returns and market positioning? How many hours had he spent in conference rooms with other wealthy people, all of them making decisions that affected thousands of workers they'd never meet, never see, never have to think about as real people? That woman behind the curtain was real. Her daughter was real. Their struggle was real. Robert stood up, his decision made before he fully realized he was making it. He walked slowly toward the curtained area, then stopped at the edge, suddenly uncertain. What was he planning to do? Walk in and announce he wanted to help? Throw money at a stranger like some kind of savior? The idea made him uncomfortable. He'd always hated the way wealthy people sometimes treated charity. like a performance, a way to feel good about themselves. A transaction where they got to play hero, but doing nothing felt worse. He stood there for a long moment, hand raised to pull back the curtain, trying to figure out the right approach. Before he could decide, a nurse walked past and gave him a questioning look. "Can I help you?" Robert lowered his hand. "Is the woman in that bed okay?" I overheard she collapsed. The nurse's expression became professionally neutral. "I can't discuss patient information." "Of course. I understand." The nurse walked away and Robert let his hand drop. Maybe this was a sign. Maybe he should mind his own business. Excuse me. Robert turned to find the elderly woman who'd brought the child. She was looking at him with sharp, assessing eyes. "Were you asking about Linda?" she said. "I don't know her name. I overheard her situation and Robert trailed off, not sure how to explain. The elderly woman studied him for a long moment. "You have the look of someone who knows something about struggle," she said finally. "Either you've lived it or someone you loved lived it." Robert was startled by her perception. "My mother. She died from complications of diabetes when I was 18. She couldn't afford proper treatment." The woman nodded slowly. "Linda's a good person. Works herself to the bone for that little girl. But there's only so much a person can do when the numbers don't add up." "I'd like to help," Robert said. The words came out before he could second-guess them. "Help how?" Good question. Robert didn't have an answer yet. He just knew that he'd been given a chance his mother never got. A chance to make enough money that medical care was never a worry. And maybe, just maybe, he could extend that chance to someone else. "I need to think about it," he said honestly. "But I'd like to talk to her if she's willing." "Not now, she needs to rest. But later." The elderly woman looked him up and down, taking in his expensive watch, his tailored clothes, the unconscious confidence that came with wealth. "Who are you?" "Someone who understands," Robert said. "And someone who has the means to actually do something about it." He pulled out his wallet and extracted a business card, writing his personal cell phone number on the back. "Please give this to her when she's—" Linda was released from the hospital the following afternoon with strict instructions, a new prescription for insulin, and a bill that made her want to crawl back into bed and never get up. Mrs. Patterson had insisted on driving her home and staying to help get Mia settled. The older woman had also, somewhat mysteriously, handed Linda a business card before leaving. "A man at the hospital gave me this," Mrs. Patterson had said. "He said he'd like to talk to you. Seemed genuine, but you be careful. I looked him up on my phone. He's very wealthy." "Very wealthy." Linda had looked at the card. Robert Hayes, with a logo she vaguely recognized from tech news. On the back, someone had written a cell phone number in neat handwriting. "What does he want?" Linda had asked. "He said he wants to help. Said his mother had diabetes too. Couldn't afford treatment. She died when he was young." Linda had tucked the card into her purse and tried not to think about it. In her experience, when wealthy people said they wanted to help, it usually came with strings attached. Publicity, conditions, the expectation of gratitude that bordered on performance. But 3 days later, as she sat at her kitchen table trying to figure out how to pay the electric bill, the rent, the new medical bills, and buy groceries, she found herself pulling out the card again. What did she have to lose? She dialed the number, half expecting it to go to voicemail or an assistant. Instead, a man answered on the second ring. "This is Robert. Hi. This is Linda Rodriguez. I was told you wanted to speak with me?" Linda, yes. "Thank you for calling." His voice was warm, professional, but not corporate. "How are you feeling?" "Better, thank you." "I'm glad to hear that. I know this is unusual, but I was at the hospital the day you came in. I overheard your conversation with the billing department, and I'd really like to talk with you about your situation if you're willing." Linda's grip tightened on the phone. "Why?" "Because I've been where you are. Not personally, but my mother. She made the same choices you did. She died from diabetes complications when I was 18, because she couldn't afford proper care. I've spent 30 years wishing I could go back and change that. I can't. But maybe I can help someone else who's facing the same impossible decisions." There was something in his voice, not pity, but understanding. Real understanding, the kind that only came from experience. "What kind of help are you talking about?" Linda asked carefully. "The kind with no strings attached. Can we meet somewhere? Coffee shop, restaurant, wherever you're comfortable. I'd like to explain in person." They agreed to meet at a diner, not Romano's, the next morning. Linda arranged for Mrs. Patterson to watch Mia and spent the evening oscillating between hope and suspicion. Robert was already there when she arrived, sitting in a corner booth with 2 cups of coffee. He stood when he saw her, tall, well-dressed but not flashy, with graying hair and tired eyes that looked like they'd seen a lot of life. "Linda, thank you for coming." He gestured to the seat across from him. "I ordered you coffee, but please get whatever you'd like." They sat down, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Linda wrapped her hands around the warm mug, waiting. "I'm going to be direct because I think that's what you'd prefer," Robert said finally. "I overheard your situation at the hospital. Single mother, working full-time, can't afford your medication. Had to choose between medicine and feeding your daughter. Does that about cover it?" Linda nodded, unable to speak around the sudden lump in her throat. "Here's what I'd like to do if you'll let me." Robert pulled out a folder from the messenger bag beside him. "I've had my team do some research. Nothing invasive, just publicly available information. You're 3 months behind on rent. You have about $18,000 in medical debt, not counting the new emergency room visit. You drive a 15-year-old car that barely passes inspection. And you're working doubles at a diner that doesn't offer health insurance. Are you trying to make me feel worse?" Linda asked, her voice sharper than she intended. "No, I'm trying to show you that I've done my homework. I'm not going into this blind, and I'm not doing this on a whim." He slid a piece of paper across the table. "This is a check. It's for $250,000. Linda stared at the check, at the number written on it, at her own name on the pay to the order of line. Her hands started shaking. "This is a joke," she whispered. "It's not. That money is for you, no strings attached. But let me explain what I'm proposing it cover." Robert pulled out another paper, a detailed breakdown. $60,000 to pay off all your existing debts, including the new hospital bill. $40,000 for a reliable car and 6 months of basic living expenses at your current level. Rent, utilities, food. $50,000 in a trust fund for your daughter's education. That leaves $100,000. Linda couldn't breathe. The numbers were so large they didn't seem real. "The $100,000 is set up as a medical fund," Robert continued. "It's in an account that can only be used for healthcare expenses. Medications, doctor visits, preventive care, whatever you need. At your current medication costs, that should last you about 15 years. Probably more if we can get you into better programs." "Why?" The word came out as barely more than a whisper. "Why would you do this?" Robert leaned back, and for the first time, his professional demeanor cracked slightly. "Because my mother died at 54 years old. She died in a hospital, scared and in pain, with kidney failure and diabetic ulcers and so many complications that could have been prevented. She died because she'd spent 20 years rationing her insulin, skipping doctor's appointments, stretching her medicine, all so she could keep a roof over our heads and food in my stomach." He paused, his voice thick with emotion. "I built my business, made my fortune, did everything I was supposed to do. I donate to charities. I fund scholarships. I sit on nonprofit boards. But none of that brings her back. None of that changes the fact that she suffered unnecessarily because our system is fundamentally broken." "So this is guilt money?" Linda asked, not unkindly. "Maybe partly," Robert admitted. "But it's also practical. You're a good mother making impossible choices. Your daughter needs you. This city needs people like you. Hard workers, decent people trying to do right by their families. If I can remove the impossible choices from your life, why wouldn't I?" Linda looked at the check again. $250,000. More money than she'd earn in 10 years. Maybe 15 years. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "There has to be something. People don't just give away this kind of money. I want you to accept it," Robert said simply. "And I want you to stay healthy for your daughter. That's it. No publicity. In fact, I'd prefer you didn't tell anyone about this except maybe your immediate family. No payback expected. No conditions. Just take the help and use it to build a better life." Linda felt tears starting to flow and couldn't stop them. "I don't understand. I'm nobody. I'm just a waitress who made a stupid choice." "You made a brave choice," Robert interrupted firmly. "You're not nobody. You're a mother who loves her daughter. You're a person who works hard and tries to do the right thing in a system that makes that almost impossible. And you didn't make a stupid choice. You made the only choice you had." He pushed the check closer to her. "Please, let me do this. Let me help make sure your daughter doesn't end up where I was, losing a parent who should have lived decades longer." Linda picked up the check with shaking hands. It felt too light to represent so much money, so much relief, so much possibility. "There's one more thing," Robert said, pulling out another document. "This is a job offer. My company has a community outreach program that works with families in situations like yours. We help them navigate the healthcare system, connect them with resources, advocate for them. We need someone who actually understands what these families are going through, not someone who read about it in a book, but someone who's lived it." He slid the paper across. "It's a management position. $85,000 a year, full health insurance, retirement benefits, 3 weeks paid vacation. You'd be heading up a small team working directly with families. The job is real. I'm not making up a position to justify giving you money. We genuinely need someone with your experience and perspective." Linda looked at the job offer. $85,000, benefits, health insurance. The words swam before her eyes. "I don't have a college degree," she managed to say. "You have something better. Lived experience and empathy. Those can't be taught. The practical skills we can train. So what do you say?" Linda sat in that diner booth, a check for a life-changing amount of money in one hand and a job offer in the other. And she did something she hadn't done in years. She let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, things could actually get better. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder, "Yes, I accept. All of it, thank you." "Thank you." Robert smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Thank me by using this chance well. Stay healthy. Raise your daughter. Help other families who are where you were. That's all the thanks I need." They talked for another hour about logistics, setting up the accounts, starting the new job, getting her medical care sorted out. By the time Linda left the diner, she was carrying not just a check, but hope. Real hope, for the first time and longer than she could remember. She stopped by the pharmacy on the way home. The same pharmacist was at the counter, the one who'd watched Linda walk away empty. 2 years felt like both a lifetime and no time at all. Linda stood backstage at the community center, smoothing down her jacket for the 3rd time and trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. Through a gap in the curtain, she could see the auditorium filling up with people, families, community members, local officials, and representatives from organizations across the city. "You're going to do great, Mom," Mia whispered beside her. At 10 years old, she'd grown taller, more confident, and carried herself with the security that came from knowing she was loved and cared for. "I'm nervous," Linda admitted. "Just tell them your story." That's what Mr. Hayes said, right? Just tell the truth, just tell the truth. Simple advice that felt enormous in practice. A woman with a headset approached them. "Ms. Rodriguez, you're on in 5 minutes. Your daughter can sit in the front row if she'd like." Linda squeezed Mia's hand. "Go ahead, sweetie. I'll see you after." Mia hugged her tight. "I'm proud of you, Mom. Those words, I'm proud of you." Mom meant more than any paycheck, any job title, any recognition ever could. Linda watched her daughter settle into the front row, then took a deep breath and tried to remember how she'd gotten here. The past 2 years had been transformative. The job Robert offered had been real, not a charity position, but actual work that mattered. As the director of the Hayes Foundation's No More Impossible Choices program, Linda oversaw a team of 8 people who worked directly with families struggling with medical debt and healthcare access. They'd helped 2,147 families in 2 years. Linda knew the number by heart because each one represented real people. Parents who could now afford their medications, children who could see the dentist, seniors who didn't have to choose between food and prescriptions. Some days the work was exhausting. She heard story after story that echoed her own. The impossible mathematics of poverty, the crushing weight of medical debt, the fear that kept people awake at night. But unlike her time at the diner, this exhaustion came with purpose. Every family they helped was a small victory against a system that seemed designed to break people. Linda had also gone back to school, taking online classes in social work and nonprofit management. Robert had been right. Her lived experience was valuable, but pairing it with formal education made her even more effective. She was 3 classes away from her bachelor's degree. Most importantly, her health had stabilized. Regular access to insulin, routine doctor's appointments, a nutritionist who helped her manage her diet, a stress level that no longer included constant financial panic. All of it combined to give her the best blood sugar control she'd had in over a decade. The irony wasn't lost on her. The medical system that had nearly killed her was the same system that was now keeping her alive, simply because she could afford to access it properly. "Ms. Rodriguez?" The woman with the headset beckoned. "You're up." Linda walked onto the stage to polite applause. The lights were bright enough that she couldn't see most of the audience, but she could see Mia in the front row sitting next to Mrs. Patterson, and in the very back, trying to be inconspicuous, was Robert. He'd insisted on staying anonymous. The foundation bore his name, but he rarely appeared at public events, preferring to let the work speak for itself. Linda suspected he was only here today because she'd specifically asked him to come. She stepped up to the podium, looked out at all those faces, and began. 2 years ago, I stood in a pharmacy and made a choice that almost killed me. I had $220 to last until my next paycheck, and I needed to buy insulin that cost $185. I also had a hungry 8-year-old daughter waiting in the car. The audience was quiet, listening. I chose my daughter. I chose food over medicine. I chose her survival over mine because that's what parents do. We make impossible choices every single day, and we tell ourselves it'll be okay, we'll figure it out, we just need to get through until the next paycheck. Linda gripped the edges of the podium. But sometimes there is no next paycheck. Sometimes the choice catches up with you. I collapsed at work 5 days later with a blood sugar over 500. I ended up in the emergency room with a $4,000 bill I had no way to pay. She paused, letting that sink in. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because I'm not unique. There are thousands of people in this city alone making similar choices right now. Millions across this country, choosing between medicine and rent, between food and utilities, between their health and their family's basic needs. Linda looked directly at where she knew Robert was sitting. But I got lucky. Someone who understood what I was going through stepped in and helped, not with judgment, not with conditions, but with real practical support that addressed the root of the problem. And that help didn't just save my life, it gave me the opportunity to help save others. She shared statistics from their program. The families served, the medical debt cleared, the health outcomes improved. But more than numbers, she shared stories. The single father who could finally afford his heart medication. The grandmother who got the diabetes supplies her insurance wouldn't cover. The young mother with cancer who could focus on treatment instead of bankruptcy. Every one of these families was making impossible choices before they found us. And here's what I've learned. The problem isn't that people don't work hard enough or don't manage money well enough or don't care enough. The problem is a system that forces working families to choose between fundamental necessities. Linda's voice grew stronger. But here's what else I've learned. When we remove those impossible choices, amazing things happen. People stay healthy. Kids stay fed. Families stay together. Parents can focus on their work instead of constant survival mode. It's not complicated, it's just about having enough. Enough money, enough support, enough compassion. She glanced down at her notes, then decided to go off script. I want to tell you one more story. Last month, a woman came into our office. Her name was Brenda. She was a home health aide, 56 years old, working 3 part-time jobs with no benefits. She had type 2 diabetes and hadn't been able to afford her medication in 6 months. When I met her, her feet had sores that weren't healing, early signs of diabetic neuropathy. Linda felt her throat tighten but pushed through. Brenda reminded me so much of myself 2 years ago. Same tired eyes, same defeated posture, same quiet desperation. We got her enrolled in a medication assistance program, connected her with a clinic, helped her negotiate her medical debts. Within weeks, her health started improving. But here's the part that really got me. 2 weeks ago, Brenda came back to our office. She'd brought her paycheck and wanted to donate $50 to help another family. $50 that she definitely needed herself. When I tried to tell her she should keep it, she said something I'll never forget. Someone helped me when I had nothing. Now I have something. That means I can help someone else. Linda looked out at the audience. That's what real change looks like. Not just solving one person's problem, but creating a ripple effect of compassion and support. Brenda is still struggling. $50 didn't make her rich. But she went from completely hopeless to having hope. And when you have hope, you want to share it. She paused for a sip of water. Our program has been successful, but it's not enough. For every family we help, there are 10 more who need support. 20 more. 100 more. This work needs to expand. It needs more funding, more volunteers, more people who understand that healthcare shouldn't be a privilege. Linda pulled out a small envelope from her jacket pocket. Today, my daughter Mia wants to make an announcement. Mia stood up in the front row and a microphone was passed to her. Her voice was clear and confident in a way that made Linda's heart swell with pride. Hi, everyone. My name is Mia Rodriguez. And 2 years ago, I almost lost my mom because she couldn't afford medicine. I didn't understand it then, but I do now. So I've been saving my allowance, and I asked my friends at school to help, and we did fundraisers and bake sales. Mia held up a large ceremonial check, the kind they use in photos. We raised $3,214 to help other families pay for their medicine. It's not as much as the grown-ups can give, but my mom taught me that every little bit helps. And if kids like me can help, then everyone can. The audience erupted in applause. Linda felt tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter, healthy, confident, compassionate, literally giving back to the community that had helped save her mother. "That's my daughter," Linda said when the applause died down. And she's right. Everyone can help. Whether it's $3 or $3,000, whether it's volunteering time or sharing information or just showing compassion to someone who's struggling, it all matters. She looked around the room one final time. 2 years ago, a stranger saw me at my lowest point and chose to help without judgment, without conditions, without publicity. He didn't help me because I was special or deserving or different from anyone else struggling. He helped me because he could, and because he understood that no one should have to choose between medicine and food. Linda's voice grew soft but firm. I'm standing here today as proof that help works, that compassion works, that when we choose to support each other instead of judging each other, we can actually change lives. We can end impossible choices.